whereas school counselors help parents focus on ways to further educational and personal social growth of their children, and whereas school counselors work with teachers and other educators to help students explore their potential and set realistic goals for themselves, and whereas school counselors seek to identify, utilize community resources that can enhance and complete comprehensive school counseling programs, help students become productive members of society, and comprehensive development school counseling programs are considered an integral part of educational process that enables all students to achieve success in school. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that the Greater Albany Public School Board of Education proclamation February 7-11, 2022 as National School Counseling Week. Four, Director Morris is rationale, what's the justification, why would this happen, and we really want to keep schools open, which is exactly what you should do. And if I don't have good answers for that, you should you should make sure that everybody knows I don't have good answers for that. That's the responsibility that I have, and I appreciate that I know that, and that I'm not going to make this decision lightly, and you're not going to accept that it was anything but a decision that at least was based in what I've made contact with Susie at West Albion High School to try to get a meeting together with the CTE instructors. And with the superintendent search, we just put it off. But that's coming soon, and hope to learn more about that and then bring back some additional information. The only thing I'd like to report is I went and visited North Albion Elementary. Thank you for hosting me. Got to spend a couple hours there. Some really important work and hard work doing there. Got to go around and see the kids in class and during their breaks, and it's a challenging situation. The SEAs and the teachers and everyone else, they're having to deal with a lot of behavior issues, and that's really tough, challenging, and the patience and perseverance shown is just really impressive. Well, I'd first like to talk about I attended at least one, and I know Director Thompson and Director Wilson did, the forums with the SROs within our school district, and I was incredibly impressed by Albany PD and how they answer questions and how there was a lot of opportunities from a diverse amount of our community to sit down and have talks with them. I would greatly appreciate the community stepping up and doing that, and Albany PD. And if there's a need, I think we're done with them. There may be a few more. But if there's a need from the community group, all you have to do is email us. Email the superintendent. We'll set up a meeting. We're happy to meet at the school district or a church. We're happy to meet. And I-2 is motion to approve personnel classified as presented.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. We'll jump down to the rental fees for the theater. This is a second viewing. Give opportunity for board members to speak.
I'm not comfortable with this. I don't know that I would be comfortable with it at any rate. We're still in our first year into the use of this facility. There may be schools or they've been so busy with COVID they've booked things out. The taxpayers of the GAPS district spent a lot of money developing that facility, and they did it for kids, and I personally would like to see a run of a year so we know what level we've got, and people then get comfortable and when they can book it and can't. I won't feel very good if at any point it's not available to our students because we've rented it out to an outside party. So and I don't know what the budget says in the way of projected revenue off that facility, but I can't imagine that it would be substantial enough that pausing on this to get us through a year would make that prohibitive.
As well, wouldn't oppose to bringing this back in December of next year and just kind of looking back, seeing what our usage was, unless there's an immediate need from the district.
Yeah, Chair, and I rely on Case Bowman, so as our Director of Operations on this a little bit, but I do think that we've gone to pretty good lengths to make sure that there is no intended use for, that our absolute priority is our schools and having our schools use this facility at all times whenever possible, and that the only time that we would let anybody else use it is when nothing has been scheduled, and that the time frames for which it would be used would be finite and well planned. It too is our intent to make sure that it's always used by students in the district and that there's no charge for that. And at the same time, I do think that there are some community groups who have an interest and are willing to pay a fair rental fee for its use when it's not being used otherwise. I see that that happens sometimes in like some elementary gyms or some band rooms or some other things like that, and our primary responsibility is making sure the kids get to use it when they want to use it. And then that there is some community use, perhaps, around that when it's possible. We don't have a budget amount set into our plans on this. If that doesn't happen, it's not going to cause us an issue. I do think that there probably are some folks in community groups who also have, contributed to this facility through their taxes and would like to be able to access it when it makes sense and is possible. Case, I don't know if you would add anything different to that.
No, just other than the fact that I think we look at all CAPS properties like that as well, that we want our students to have the priority for any building, and specifically to the Auburn Performing Arts Center. That's a big priority for us right now, and the intent really is that if it's a time when it's not in use, can we generate some revenue that will help offset general wear and tear on the new facility. That's really the intent.
I do know that there was one community group who, part of the reason we brought this forward now was that there was a community group that was hoping to rent it for a short time period to do a show. There may be two, actually, that I can think of. And that they and those who have been working on running this thing were hopeful that you all would approve this tonight so that possibility could move forward. But again, the intent would be that it would only be used for when students are unable to use it and wouldn't be using it otherwise. And we put it on the agenda tonight, hoping that you all would approve.
How far in advance? don't know. One could try to reserve the facility. I don't have good.
I haven't put anything to that effect in here, but we, of course, do reserve the right to say no.
I understand. My thought process, I'm trying to assuage Director Nyquist's concerns. And if we could do something like limit the amount of time before their event that you would do it to allow schools the opportunity to grab that time and perhaps set out a notice to the schools that during this time frame we're planning on renting this out. If you have plans to use it, you need to speak now, or we're going to commit the facility to for these days. That might allow that would allow schools to know when they would be able to use this, and that they had another opportunity to commit to using the facility. And if not, then I wouldn't have much hesitation in renting that.
Well, we certainly can and have attempted to do that. One of the things about the facility and the way it's designed, is that with the different flies and so forth that can go up and down, and the spacing behind those, there's lots of opportunity to have sets and different backgrounds and things like that come on stage very quickly, and it can be put away and used by our schools during the day, and then everything can be rolled into place for an evening performance if it's a different group that's using it. So that's the design and intent, and that's a way that we can make sure that our students are able to use it, and we have some room for community folks as well.
Much like our ball fields, I think in looking at the policy, I think it really contemplates many of these community groups are kids who's using it, and I don't see. I mean, if we were swamped and is being used by the community so heavily, then we'd have to revisit it. But I think when we say community, I think a lot of it's going to be our kids using it.
I guess the last thing I would just say is that when this got put together and we began to have these conversations, these were not initiated by myself or Mr. Bowman. These were initiated by Stuart Welch, who's the music teacher at West Albany High School, and also Principal Orsborn, who came and advocated for this and wanted to make sure that this got in front of you in a timely fashion. And we're supportive of it and helped design it.
I think really what only thing the majority of us are looking for is the idea that schools have priority. We're not going to go out too far in advance. The schools are always going to be the number one. There we go. The first year is the first year. There's going to be some learning, unfortunately. But let's not try to, let's not, like some of the concerns have been, book it too far out and thereby a kid can't do it. Maybe after a few years we can get a little better about that because we'll know what annual requirements we have. One of the things I think we're going to find is people are going to recognize this facility for what it is and want to use it, right? So hopefully our students will start doing that, so we just have to give the opportunity for our kids to do that. And it sounds like if you go about it smartly, it can be done. Everyone can be a winner.
I'm just looking for a first right of refusal for the school district in it. And I don't
That's fair.
clearly see that in this AR.
So there, if I might, Mr. Chairman, there's a couple issues with that. So all good points. I'll concede all of those. However, we have a situation right now, the South Albany football field, where at times it would appear that our kids, that thing is scheduled far enough out. Both people at the school and related to the school would like to use that facility, and it's booked out. And for the revenue it generates, I don't. And so you get into a right of first refusal. Who's going to want to book that facility and plan it and organize things and sell tickets and get all of that done, knowing that if a middle school wants to use that and they give 30 days notice, your event's blown up. So it's easier said than done. And I appreciate that it is the community's asset, the school district's asset. So other groups that have connections to the school or community-based, that it makes sense to me they want to do that. how do we get there? And you have two groups, I guess, that right now would like to book that facility for when?
One of them is mid-February. if I have that
Mid-February is
timeline
the first, yes.
Okay, so it's not likely that some school group is going to want to come in mid-February and book that thing out. So that makes some sense. I mean, I don't, I don't think we're the booking agent of that facility, nor do I intend to be, but just being very pragmatic about it. And so when's the other one?
I don't know that. I know that Mr. Welsh had both dates down when he talked to us. I just didn't think to write them down.
So process-wise, where are we? Is this an action item tonight?
That's what staff
If I
was asking
yield,
for.
and maybe if I don't yield, then you run over me.
Well, I mean, it is a problem. We see it South Albany. We see it at the pool with the same thing with the clubs and school and private groups.
And Chair Ogden, I would just, so I would want Director Nyquist to know that I've had a conversation with the athletic director at South Albany around that very issue and the use of the field to ensure that we're having our students use that when they want to use it. And that any kind of booking or anything like that would be consistent with the idea of that we're going to use it first. So we've had that conversation because I know that in the past, there's been question about it as an issue, and I want to make sure that it's not.
I appreciate that, but I think today that thing is booked out far enough that we're jammed up and will be for a while.
So there are two policies also that are attached to this. Just taking a look at them, there are some things in those policies, like availability. The district reserves the right to grant or deny permission for use of facilities at its sole discretion. And so those are in district policy, and they're attached to this because they go along with it. There we go. And we have a music concert underway now.
I think it's fixed.
Yes, we are fixed on the sound, so
So I should stop filibustering this issue.
not necessarily.
So look, can we at least do this in the short term? Again, I'm good with those two events, especially knowing that it's related to Stewart and school related, but set up a process that you don't go further than X months out. I don't know what the right number is. I don't know if it's 90 days. I don't know if it's 6 months. And also that before you schedule something, you communicate that out to the schools saying we have a proposed user on this date. Does that conflict with anything anybody had even in their mind or a draft at this point?
We can see that to be done.
I just wanted to comment that I've seen Mr. Welsh's APAC calendar, and he basically knows what's going to be happening in that facility every night until August or whatever. So I think that using Mr. Welsh as if people contact Mr. Welsh, he's going to know if there's a conflict. And I think that knowing that I would feel good personally about being able to rent it out to community members who are interested.
If I were to give my 2 cents on this, knowing I've helped create different events going on, I really like to plan them and I really like to help organizations do that. A lot of them plan 2 to 3 months out, and that's what the school does as well. So I don't really see too much of if you plan it too far out, it's going to cause that big of a problem. Especially within the high schools, we have everything planned till the end of the school year right now. So it's not that it's not we're gonna pop up 20 days right before something happens. At least from what I've seen for the past 2 years. I guess you guys probably have more information on that than I do. And I do want the idea of it being a community thing is really important to me. In the sense of it's it causes a problem when it's not, because we see it at my school a lot right now. It's when it is a community thing, like our pool, you see a lot of different programs there, and then you reach out more, especially within the high schools. And I would like to see that more in a theater prospect at West. If I see organizations there, I would love to talk. And the way I'm trying to say this is, if I see it happening and we see each other getting involved, you're more likely to get involved, especially at the high schools.
all good input. I really appreciate it. I would just ask, I was supposed to quit filibustering. Just one more. So what if somebody wants this thing for a week next December and they want it now and they're going to pay cash?
Based on the direction that I've received this evening, we would say no. And I think we would have said no before that too, but not positive. So I think the idea that we would put not further than a certain number of months out and communicate to the district-wide prior to rental is important and well-reasoned.
I yield or retreat.
My last question for Mr. Bowman. So the $2 million of liability insurance, you feel is sufficient? We've had to rebuild a few things. Assistant Superintendent has been here. We've had to rebuild a few things in the last few years. $2 million goes really quick.
Yeah, so that's on par with many of the insurance requirements that we hold for folks to rent gym space, to rent classrooms. I think that's kind of a standard insurance amount that we require of our renters to provide.
Okay. All right, the action on the table is to approve as presented by staff.
I move to approve the fee schedule for public rental as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you. Motion passes.
I think we're ready.
Mr. Louder.
Famous last words.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, there you
No, sorry, Skip. We're gonna
just
do
sitting.
Steve first, but you can
Thank
hang
you.
out.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Louder. Let's do test 1, 2, 3 one more time.
Can't
We
hear
can't hear you. Negative, sir.
We're going to run it through my phone.
Put it in the chat.
Yep, that's what we're doing.
Superintendent's gonna give you a call.
I don't think it's on our end.
Conference phones.
Superintendent Saxon, can you hear me?
You're on.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone.
You're hearing him twice.
Mute that.
Hang up.
So hang on a sec.
No,
Yep, I hear it.
there you go.
Now try it.
Okay, now we're ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank everybody for the help and support during this process. We've come a long way, and we're at an important point in the process. We've gone through the applications, we've gone through stakeholder meetings, we've had stakeholder interviews, and the board had a chance to look at candidates as well. The consensus from all of these groups and all through the process, we have come up with 2 candidates that we recommend to the board for finalist interviews. It's been a long process. It's been a really good process. We have 2 very, very good, very, very competent, highly qualified candidates for you. That would then proceed, if the board accepts the recommendation, that would proceed to interviews starting tomorrow. So our recommendation, the 2 candidates are Sydney Vanderkar, who is currently the interim superintendent for Eugene School District 4J. And the other candidate is Andy Gardner, who is currently the superintendent of North Santiam School District.
Thank you, Mr. Louder.
You're welcome.
We have an action on the table to move to approve finalist candidate recommendations as presented by McPherson and Jacobson.
So moved.
I second.
Any further discussion?
Would you restate the names for the record? in case
Cindy
anybody didn't do that?
Vanderkar and Andy
Gardner.
And Cindy is from 4J Eugene, and Andy is from the Santiam School District?
Santiam.
North Santiam.
North Sinian.
So the action on the table is to move to approve final candidate recommendations as presented by McPherson and Jacobson. We had a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll see you around in the next couple days. All right, gentlemen, we're going to move to E2. Move to authorize board members to enter into contract negotiations with advice from our search consultants with final candidates. We need 2 names, please.
Just as a practical matter, I would move that it be the chair and the vice chair.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you, gentlemen. And we're going to jump way back down. And Mr. Skip.
Good evening, Chair Aguanaga and board members. You have the December end-of-month report for capital projects. We saw West Albany High School continue addressing mechanical issues that were found during the commissioning process, and that's still in play. And then also Girding Builders is finishing up, continues to finish up their punch list before it's back-checked by the architect. And we're waiting for them to request that before we do that piece. And then also, transportation project is making progress, focusing on site work still, along with the wet and dry utilities that are underground. There was heavy rain, and that did provide some challenges for the project, but it continued. There was Emmerich Construction put in a fair amount of dewatering, circulating of water, cleaning of the water, so that they could continue doing construction. And I just wanted to ask if you have any questions.
Thank you. Off easy tonight, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Assistant Superintendent Harlan will go over to you for average classroom size.
So, Chair Aganaga, members of the board, in your board packet, you'll see a class size report. I'd like to publicly thank John Dilbone for that data. You'll see it's a 12-page report. What it gives you is every single class in elementary, the number of classrooms at that grade level at that school, the average, the high, and the low. At the middle school level, it will give you averages based on the type of class, so math classes, English language arts classes, PE. It will also average it across the district for the 4 middle schools, and then you'll see high school class size. Again, you'll see sections, how many sections they have, for instance, of art, of math, of music, and you see it by high school. You'll see the average, you'll see the high and the low, and the total students. A few things to note when you're looking at this data. ELD is English Language Development. SP are special programs, so you'll see in the elementary data a highlighted row that will say SP, and that's a special program at that elementary school. You'll also see the preschool classes at the elementary. And then at the high schools, it also includes middle schools and high schools RIM, which is our remote instructional model, so the numbers that you see in grade levels for that, and then also AP classes, along with world languages, especially all of those other ones. But it gives you a sense for what our class sizes are at the elementary, middle, and high, and for what, and at the high schools, how many sections appear at each of the high schools for the types of classes there are.
Thank you, ma'am.
Just to, when you look at the total, I'm really focusing on our promise with SIA funds last year to keep kindergarten and first grade at, I don't know what our promise ended up being, but it was like 18, I think. And as an average, we got pretty dang close. I would accept it. total district-wide. We hit that number. But I think there were some super low ones that I see a lot of 25s, not a lot of 25s. I see some 25s, some 24s, some 20s. And I kind of know the challenges, but is that going to be an ongoing thing? Are we going to continue to try to keep those, be our focus at 18 or 17 from here on out?
Yeah, that's a great question, Director Thompson. I appreciate it. So you'll see that the kindergarten class size average in our district is 16.8. The highest kindergarten class is at 22 and the lowest is at 12. Kids don't come in nice, round, even numbers. And so we have some elementary schools that have a single section of kindergarten, some that have two, and of course Meadow, who has, I think, 5.
Yeah.
And so that varies, but we've seen those class sizes reduce specifically for kinder, and you'll also see for first grade pretty significantly. I have 2 children that attend this district, and both of them in kindergarten and first grade, their class sizes were 30 and 31 for both of them. And so this is a commitment that we made, and that those funds remain in SIA, that stable funding, and that we plan on continuing. And we would love to, if we ever had the opportunity to be able to increase, right, to first and second grade. We know those young years are really important ones when students are learning how to read. But I'm pretty proud of the fact that we got to an average of 16.8 and 19.9 for kinder and first grade. It's pretty remarkable.
It is.
I want to ask you about Oak Grove. This is a brand new school, but it's like one of the biggest when we look at class sizes. And every day up on that hill, a new house is built, and they're going to build more. There's a lot of development going on out there, especially multifamily homes, apartments, duplexes that are going to start going in as well.
Great question. So a few of the things that I would let you know, when I look at the numbers across the board, the biggest classes, the highs and the lows range from 19 to 25 at Oak Grove, which is not big at all and certainly not our biggest elementary class sizes. We certainly have other schools that have class sizes in 28s pretty regularly, and 26s and even higher. One of the things that we found when we enlisted the expertise of a demographer a few years ago was that while there was a lot of building happening in North Albany, it wasn't yielding the children per household that other developments were. So we knew a development was going in south around Tangent, and we also know there's a lot of developments going on east that is in the Timber Ridge, Meadow Ridge, in kind of that feeder. Those developments, according to the demographer, were yielding more children per household than the North Albany ones, and certainly that was taken into account, which is why you see a new building in Oak Grove and Meadow Ridge. We anticipated that we would open Meadow Ridge full, and we have. And that we still have some room at Oak Grove. But certainly when we look at the numbers, the class sizes, Oak Grove, while there's a lot of building over there, we still have more space, and it's certainly not the place in the district where there is building that is yielding school-age children at the rate that we would need to relook at things. That's actually happening on the east side and in that kind of south feeder, Millersburg, east of I-5, east of the fairgrounds, and then some south as well.
All right.
I have a question for you, if you wouldn't mind addressing it. Pre-K, I noticed it's at some places and not in others. Could you explain that to me?
Sure. So we started kind of our pre-K process with our early learning hub. So there is a hub with funding from the state in partnerships with local districts and organizations, and that's how our first pre-K started at Waverly. The sites that we have targeted specifically are title schools, so there are high poverty schools, and our goal would be to initially have pre-K sites at all of them using a braiding of funding, which is our early learning hub funds, some of our KPI grant funds, and some of our SIA funds for pre-K. So we have expanded probably, I'm not sure, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I think we only had 1. Now we have 3. The goal would be to get pre-Ks in all of our Title I schools. Of course, that's difficult because space is an issue at a lot of those same schools.
So, and I can get the consensus of the board, but, and I know the superintendent, I've talked about it a hair, but can the district put a plan together for next year to offer, for next year's September, to offer pre-K for all pre-K students, using funds and ESSER funds, purchase property if we have to, move around property. But it's just been a conversation that we've kicked, Michael and I have seen this conversation for a long time. And the district's done good, helping out the city, taking over the city programs and operating our own programs in Waverly. But our district, we're starting to get one of our size districts that don't offer pre-K as part of our program.
Yeah, I think that's a great question and a great point. In the last 4 years, along with the agreement that we have regarding Maple Lawn and these 3 programs, we've quadrupled the preschool offerings in the last 3 years. It's been a commitment. We know that we've been the recipient of grant funds from the state because there is kind of a childcare and pre-K desert in this area. So we knew that we would be competitive in those grants. Right now, we don't have the funding nor the space to be able to offer that. I could not confidently say, yes, we have the ability to make that happen for the fall in every elementary school. Space is certainly an issue at some of them in that, we have modular buildings trying to be installed to do that. And, certainly we need to make sure we have space for the students who are in our programs now. I would love to have a pre-K center or certainly pre-K available to any and all who wanted it in this community. I think that will make a real difference in outcomes for kids. And I certainly think it's one of the areas that if you want to make growth, you need to focus. Whether we could do all of that by the fall, I'm not confident to say yes, but I think it's a great goal and a worthy one.
What I would ask for the district is to put a dream sheet together, round it to the closest couple million.
Are we not working in conjunction with our partners like the Y and Boys and Girls Club for some of this?
For
I
sure.
would assume.
Yep. So the Boys and Girls Club doesn't necessarily offer like a pre-K kind of schooling. The YMCA does have some programs. Sometimes those are cost prohibitive. And of course, all of the programs that we offer are at no cost, right? Which is why they started at our title schools. We've certainly partnered and have through our hub and other things with even private partnerships with private preschools, just trying to support each other to expand as many offerings as possible in our community. And we'll continue to do those things, doing everything from sharing professional development and resources to ideas to connections, because all of us working together to try and multiply the numbers of opportunities there are still will not be enough. I think when we looked at the data before, it was something in the teens in terms of 19% of the pre-K population who had access to and the opportunity for preschool. And there just simply weren't enough offerings for all who wanted them.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think my mic involuntarily buzzed when you were bringing that up, as you say, give us a dream sheet. And in my budget experience, that's a scary proposition. If you think, and I'm new to this, you guys have been doing this for a while, but there just seems like a lot of variables in just normalizing and stabilizing both our current operations and the funding sources for those. We've gotten extra federal money. We've had a ton of extra work because of COVID. And so to be fair to the team, I don't know how we could accurately today project being able to do that. I think the budget proposition of just stabilizing what we're doing now, looking forward, getting out of this crisis management mode that COVID will be a challenge unto itself, and that we should, absent some federal or state program that would allow us to do this in a sustainable kind of way, we should lean on our partners and explore opportunities with them. Might be more a financially prudent way to do that. Just my 2 cents worth.
There's, I mean, I know you know from being a county commissioner, but there's always a fire at Gaps. There's the gym burning down or a cafeteria burning down or COVID happening. And I've just seen so many, I asked the people that left the board, did you reach your goals you ran for?
And Chair Aganago, I can tell you that just by way of, looking at this, that we spent a great deal of time today on budget. probably the majority of my day, just because we're in budget season, here at the district office, thinking about putting together a budget for next year and trying to grab a hold of some of the different funds and so forth and run to ground where we currently sit. And we've got some more work to do there. And I think, for us, our first blush is going to be able to really determine exactly where the budget sits and then see, what's possible to do for next year. And so if, with your permission, I'd prefer at this point in time to really get that knocked down and understand our exact budget situation before we start to try to see if it's possible to stand this up and see if there's room for that kind of thing in the budget or not. I mean, certainly, that's the first, our first need is to make sure that we can continue to afford what we have been offering and, understand where we are with SIA funds, ballot measure 98 funds, ESSER funds, GEAR funds, and we're getting closer, but we still have some work to do on that. And I'll be able to give you a much better picture in the next month or so on that.
Okay, we'll talk again in a month.
Yeah.
We'll move on.
Okay.
And I believe you have the next one, Mr. Superintendent, the SRO report.
I do. I try to share that, some of that on my screen there, on the screen up here, so that people can see it, and I think it's on the screen up there as well, in regard to what, let me see if I can move this on my screen now, what the SRO report, I better put my glasses on. What the SRO report looked like, and so you can see it here. We've said that we would go over these reports quarterly, and I met with Officer Bell. We had a couple conversations, and I see Officer Bell is in the room tonight. Officer Bell, if you'd like to, come
Like to.
to this microphone.
Enjoy the hot seat. Yeah.
Right there.
And he may like not to.
He's like, I'd like to not.
call, I gotta go.
And just, I know that you all know that Officer Bell is our SRO and has been involved in some of the community meetings that we've had and been in our schools and has been really supportive and appreciated some of the things. We've had some things come up, and he's always been there and really appreciate it. If you could sort of explain the report, then I wouldn't have to, and that'd be lovely.
Sure, okay. So this represents my investigations within the school district. So district-wide, I started in my SRO position the second week of November, so that's what this date range captures, is from just before my start date to just when Superintendent Saxton requested the report. So I had 4 investigations, and you can see the breakdown. That upper left box is by age, the middle one is by race, and the one on the right is by sex. And so I don't know if you guys can read that from there. So I don't know the total number of students in GAPS right now, but in that date range, having 4 investigations, I've spent most of my time on preventative things and working with administrators on things that have come up in social media and those issues. So happy to answer any questions. That sort of middle of the screen there, that where it says nature, and then there's those 3. That's representative of how the call came in. So that's not necessarily, so a juvenile complaint, that's obviously not a criminal code. That's the title of the call. But a lot of the assaultive type behaviors comes in as a juvenile complaint. So that's the nature of the call. And then center of the screen there, that shows the involved schools. So West Timber Memorial and Calapooya. And then that gray box to the right, the disposition. So that's how, or that represents what occurred at the end of the case. So there are, let me try and find, there's on the arrest type, there's an O and an S, and that represents you can see the red in the bottom left, arrested or citation. And so those are codes that we use Most of what we do within the juvenile world is that they are referred to the juvenile department and not taken into physical custody. There are very few, it's felony crimes and significant crimes that a juvenile would be taken into physical custody and transported to the Lynn Benton Detention Center. So that's what the O and the S stands for. Any questions? Kind of cruised through it. I apologize if that was too fast.
Perfect.
Welcome, thank you for all you do. I mean, I've heard really great things. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
I think this kind of flows with what you said at the public events. Your job as far as getting involved, here's a couple months and we're talking about 4 events, 4 instances that you've, 4 reports that you made, and I look forward. This is great. This is the first time we've had an SRO come explain what their outcomes have been, and it gives us a good start. I think this is what you're there for. As far as I know you do a whole bunch of other stuff, but I like to see only 4 in a couple months.
Likewise. Thank you.
And this is something we'll see on a regular basis?
Quarterly.
Excellent. Quarterly.
All right.
Officer Bell.
Thank you very much, Officer Bell.
Mr. Superintendent, graduation rates.
Yes. So I'll see if I can share that as well. So this last week, graduation rates came out across the state, and it's kind of interesting when the state has thought quite a bit about this and tried to make these rates into something that's understandable for folks and something that people can access. So there actually are, I'm going to try to find 4-year cohort graduation rates. So when I talk about this, I'm using really specific language. And this is what I think most people think of. One second. This is what I think most people think of when they start talking about graduation. And actually, I don't even think most people think of this. So 4-year cohort graduation rate means that students started as a freshman, and 4 years later, they graduated with their class, if you will, with a regular diploma. And what we've got on this graph is years over time, with the state being the far left, district being orange, AOS being the green, South Albany in red, and West Albany in blue. So on the right is 2015, at the far left is the latest data that we have, 2021. And what you'll see there is for our 4-year cohort graduation rate, and this is district-wide, 79.89% of our students graduated in 4 years, and 80.63% of the state students graduated in 4 years. If you go back across the graph, you'll see that that is not typical. And in fact, in every previous year, the orange line, the district line, has been above that of the state, including in 2019, where we had 86.9% meeting 4-year cohort graduation as compared to 82.63% for the state. Certainly, any time that there's a single student that doesn't graduate in 4 years with a diploma is not exactly what we wanted to have happen. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that and know that when that does happen, you have students who are not doing as well as we would wish, or that there's some kind of circumstance that causes that to happen, right? And so need to acknowledge that, absolutely, and we need to make sure that we're improving on the percentage that we accomplished last year. I also do think, by way of just making a single statement, would be that we've not been in typical years. And one of the things that we know for sure is that different districts have approached the awarding of credits differently over the last couple of years than probably we have, and that there is some variability in this that is not typical in 18, 19, all the way back to 14, 15. And that Greater Albany Public Schools, by and large, has performed very well in this data point. And so I'll just leave it at that. I want to then bring your eyes to a couple other data sets. Another one is the, let's see, I'll get them right, is this one is a place where 5-year cohort graduation rate. This would be that students graduate with a diploma, but instead of 4 years, it took them 5 years to do it. And if you can see, this is the same data set in that we have all of the different years lined up there. So 14, 15, all the way to 2021. And if you go over here, the slides are the same. My screen is so weird, I'm sorry. If I go over here, you can see on the far left, which is 2021, 87.43% of students in GAPS graduated in 5 years as compared to 84.49% for the state. And so this is a data point that historically we've outperformed the state, and we continue to outperform the state last year. If I go to this data set, 4-year cohort completer rates. Now, the other data set was graduation rate, 4-year cohort graduation. This is 4-year cohort completer. That means that these students completed with some kind of a certificate. They may have completed with a GED, a diploma, or a modified diploma. And so in this instance, again, same years, same data set that we had before, all the way out here, and you'll see that 86.28% of students in Greater Albany Public Schools graduated or completed in 4 years as compared to 82.79 for the state. And so we do have some students that are getting GEDs, and if you look at the green line in 2021, that's AOS, 84.62% of students. You should know, and I think this is very important for everybody to know, that is incredibly unusual that an alternative school has that kind of a graduation rate or a completer rate. And what you'll see a lot of times in districts is that you'll have these high schools. A district with 6 high schools may have 6 high schools with fairly high graduation rates, and then an alternative school with an exceedingly low graduation or completer rate, or high schools with completer rates and still an alternative school with a very low completer rate. And kids have been moved out of their home high school into alternative schools, and that alternative school and the students in that alternative school have significantly underperformed. And you don't see that with our alternative school. They do incredible work, and this is a really good example of what you start to see when you look at the data in Greater Albany Public Schools. Just really honestly, I don't ever see any district ever with that kind of outcome when you start looking at alternative schools. I'm just not aware of any other one. And I see Superintendent Harlan shaking her head as well because I just don't see it. And so it's something to be pleased about. And then lastly is the 5-year completer rate. So this is that in 5 years, and you know, we'd like to have kids complete in 4 years. But if they don't complete in 4 years, I don't think we should be giving up on them. And the fact that we make a difference in that 5th year is really important, right? We're going to hang with kids, stick with them, make sure that when they leave here, that they've got a piece of paper in their hand that says, I have a diploma, I have a GED, I have a extended diploma, I have an alternative diploma, and I'm ready based on that piece of paper for my next steps. And so when we look at that, in Albany, last year, 93.23% of students had a 5-year completer rate. And statewide, that's 87.75, gap there of about 5.5%. That's pretty remarkable again, and if you go back over time and look at our 5-year completer rate, you'll see that it varies somewhere between a high of about 95 and 93%. And so that's been very consistent over time. And again, take a look at the far left there because I want you to see where those sort of top out. You've got West Albany at 99.28%, South Albany at 91.96%, AOS at 86.67%, for an aggregate 93.23. I'd be happy to take questions.
I have one, at least one. I think the way you've laid those out, state average, district, and then the different schools is all good. My question is, as you go across and look at the previous years, is that an apples to apples comparison? Because didn't the state waive testing? Was it all testing? Was it some testing? I mean, Tell
Yeah.
me about that and
Sure.
tell me what I should read into the progression from 2014 to this last year with the reduction in testing and requirements.
So the state used to require that in order for a student to get a high school diploma, they had to meet a set of essential skills, and they needed to complete the 24 credits that are required to earn a diploma with passing or higher. And the essential skills is a set of assessments, pretty much. I'll talk about some of the vagaries of that, but in reading, writing, speaking, and math, science, and science. And so there was a set of essential skills, and you had to pass all of those at a certain level on the assessment and earn 24 credits, and then you got an Oregon diploma. With the advent of COVID and some other concerns about state testing, the state had been talking about whether or not they wanted to continue with that, and then when COVID came out, they abandoned that. I think for the 1920 school year, and then again for last year, the 2021 school year. There were other ways that students could demonstrate the essential skills. Besides just taking the test, there also was a classroom portfolio, basically, where you could do a set of work, have it scored at different times. It had to be multiply scored by different people so that you could make sure that it really and truly was a portfolio of evidence that said I have a high level of skill in the areas that I talked about. And if students did that, then they also could demonstrate the essential skill. So there are a couple of different ways to get at that. And that has been put on hiatus. I know that the Department of Education is reexamining how to think about that moving forward. At this point in time, I don't have any indication of where they are on that exactly.
Thank you.
Yep.
On the last slide, the 4-year cohort graduation rate, can you tell us how many seniors short there were to meet 100? So like West is 93.13. How many seniors short for didn't complete?
I probably could do that calculation, although I don't have the numbers.
In an email would be great.
We can definitely do that in an email. I mean, if each class had,
About 300.
I was gonna
give
do
or
easy
take.
math, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna say 300. If we were at 300 and you were 7% short of that, it'd be 21 kids. One of the other things that, and I'm gonna, y'all get tired of me. I'll put on my ODE hat for a second because I used to be at ODE. I don't think everybody always appreciates this, but Oregon, when we're talking about sort of Oregon standards, Oregon has a much more stringent way of calculating graduation rate than do other states. So just by way of example, I think it's Wisconsin. You need to have been enrolled for 6 months. And if you then, at a school, if you were enrolled for 6 months and then you went away, you left a district, then you belong to that district in their calculation of their 4-year cohort graduation rate. If you were less than 6 months, it doesn't count. If you came for a day or a week or a month or 5 months and left, you're not counted as a student who used to belong to that school that no longer does. Not the case in Oregon. If you enroll in a school for 1 minute, you belong to that school, and that school is responsible for you when it comes to 4-year cohort graduation rate or any of the other ones, completer rates and so forth. And we did last year have some students, I know 3 specifically at South Albany, who joined through RIM for less than an hour that we could not get to return, and they're on our dropout list. It's apples to apples in Oregon, but it isn't apples to apples to Oregon compared to almost all the rest of the nation. Any kid who comes and leaves, we must find that they enrolled in another school someplace in order for them to not count as a kid who disappeared from us and counts against the 4-year cohort graduation rate. There are other states, Texas primarily, where if you leave, you're gone, and if they don't know where you are, you don't count against them. It's why Texas typically has a 95 to a 99% 4-year cohort graduation rate for all students.
That's the definition of dropping out.
The problem with Texas is they have a border to their south, and you have large numbers of students because the state of Texas also allows students from Mexico to attend free, you must enroll, no charge, and if those students were to disappear or go home, then they don't calculate in the dropout rate. And so it's a little confounding, and I understand part of the reason that they do that. But there are oftentimes a lot of people who want to talk about Oregon's low graduation rate, and I think you have to be fair and compare apples to apples. That's there. Now I'll take off Modi. He had, it matters not about any of this, but I can't help myself once in a while.
To
Sorry.
Superintendent Saxton's point, though, when you say how many seniors is that, it might not be 21 seniors. It might be actually 10 who were freshmen and we didn't see again, and another 5 when they were sophomores and juniors, and it might be 2 seniors, right? So it's
and
over
precisely, that's exactly probably what happened. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yep.
Okay, we prefer your math teacher hat anyway.
Yes, sorry.
We'll move on to M1. That's Ms. Heather.
It's Superintendent Saxton.
Superintendent Saxton tonight.
Right.
Let me see if I can get out of this stuff and back into my board book. 1 second. This is M1? All right. So tonight we bring for your consideration a memorandum of understanding between Greater Albany Public Schools and Greater Albany Association of Classified Employees. What you'll find in this tentative agreement is a agreement that in many cases mirrors the agreement that we reached with our licensed staff. And for example, number 1, vaccines. So if a member gets a vaccine and it has them be sick, they have 1 additional day of paid sick leave. It's retroactive basically to October 1st. And the other parts, again, mirror that. The one part that doesn't is item number 6, staff appreciation. And in staff appreciation, we put forward a $400 stipend to all classified staff effective February 1, 2022, with the expectation of remaining a district employee through June 15th, 2022. Our classified staff have been amazing over the course of this year. They've stepped into the fray on thousands of different occasions, and they have kept us running when it wouldn't be possible otherwise at great personal effort and commitment. And so we want to recognize that, and I would recommend that the board adopt this.
Action is to move to approve the GAACE Memorandum of Understanding as presented.
So moved.
And
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you very much. Is there any
Thank you.
future agenda items? And other business? I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
I move for adjournment.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned at 8:35. Thank you.
These little thank you cards are so R.I.P. Dear school, thank you for putting Laura Chadwick in as a 4th grade teacher. And then R.I.P. everyone called out no one.
Wait, can I take a picture of that? That's my first mom.
Oh, really? I'm so
Complaint or anything, I was just looking at the packet. It said performing arts and arts.
Even though you were with your.
I'm just doing the poll. I don't have to put my big meat hook in there.
That's right. I'm gonna